The flames still danced behind Willa Ashford's eyelids every time she blinked. Orange and hungry against the black Wyoming sky, consuming everything Charles had built to cage her in. She stood in the dusty street of Gold Hill, Nevada, 3 weeks later with nothing but the scorched dress on her back and the truth burning in her throat, a truth no one wanted to hear. "Murderess," someone hissed as she passed. Willa kept walking, chin high despite the trembling in her legs. The Nevada sun beat down mercilessly on this September day in 1876. So different from the ranch outside Cheyenne, where she'd spent 2 years of hell masquerading as matrimony. She'd fled Wyoming with nothing, riding through Colorado and into Nevada on sheer determination and the $20 she'd found in Charles's coat pocket before the fire started. Before everything ended. Before she'd finally been free. The boarding house ahead looked weathered but clean, its paint peeling in strips like the skin she'd shed when she'd stopped being Charles Ashford's wife. The proprietor, a thin woman with suspicious eyes, stood on the porch sweeping dust that would return within the hour. "I need a room," Willa said, her voice steady despite everything. "I can work for my keep. I'm good with washing, mending, cooking." "You're that woman." The proprietor's eyes narrowed. The one they're saying burned down her husband's house with him inside. "The house burned," Willa confirmed, meeting her gaze directly. "Charles was drunk, knocked over a lamp. He made it out just fine last I saw. Disappointed to inform you, he's very much alive." "That's not what they're saying in town. Telegraph came through from Wyoming. They're saying you tried to murder him." Willa's stomach dropped, but she forced herself to remain calm. "I left him alive, cursing my name. If he's dead now, it's no doing of mine. And if he's alive and lying about what happened, well, that would be exactly like him." The woman studied her for a long moment. "I don't have rooms for women running from the law." "I'm not running from the law. I'm running from a man who broke 3 of my ribs last Christmas, who split my lips so many times I stopped being able to taste anything, who burned my hands with his cigars when dinner wasn't to his liking. I'm running from a man who told me every day that if I ever left, he'd hunt me down and make sure I never drew another breath." Willa's voice didn't shake, even as her hands did. The house burned because he was drunk and careless, like he was with everything except his cruelty. That's the truth. The proprietor's expression shifted, something softer moving behind her eyes. "I knew a man like that once," she said quietly. Then, louder, "I don't have rooms. Move along?" Willa nodded, swallowing against the despair rising in her throat. She turned to leave, her feet aching in boots worn thin from travel. But," the woman continued, and Willa froze. "I do know someone who might help. There's a man lives up in the mountains, about 5 miles north. Name's Isaiah Bridger. He's not much for company, but he's decent. More decent than most. He came down last month looking for someone to help with his place before winter sets in proper. You'd be working, not taking charity. I don't know anything about mountain living. You know about surviving. That's more important." The woman's eyes were kind now. "Follow the north trail past the mining camp. When it forks, go east. You'll see his cabin near the tree line. Big structure, built solid. Can't miss it." "Why would he help me?" The woman smiled grimly. "Isaiah Bridger's got his own ghosts. He doesn't judge others for theirs." The climb took longer than Willa expected, her weakened body protesting every step up the mountain path. The Nevada landscape shifted around her, sage and scrub giving way to pine and aspen as elevation increased. Her lungs burned with the thin air, and twice she had to stop to rest, sitting on sun-warmed rocks while the world spun gently around her. By the time she spotted the cabin, The sun had begun its descent toward the western peaks, painting everything gold and amber. The structure was indeed impressive. Solid logs chinked expertly together, a stone chimney rising from one end, windows that caught the fading light like watchful eyes. Outbuildings dotted the cleared area around it, a barn, a smokehouse, what looked like a workshop. This was no rough prospector's shack, but a true homestead, built by hands that knew their craft. Willa approached slowly, aware of how she must look. A bedraggled woman in a singed dress, her dark hair escaping from its pins, her face sunburned and dust-covered. She'd cleaned up as best she could at a creek a mile back, but there was only so much cold water could accomplish. The man who emerged from the barn, at the sound of her footsteps, made her breath catch. He stood well over 6 feet tall, with shoulders that seemed to span the doorway, his arms thick with muscle beneath rolled shirt sleeves. Dark hair fell past his collar, sun streaked at the ends, and his face was all strong angles, sharp jawline covered in several days of beard growth. Straight nose, eyes so intensely blue they seemed to hold pieces of the mountain sky. He moved with the easy confidence of someone completely at home in his body and his surroundings. "Help you?" His voice was deep, wary but not unfriendly. "The woman at the boarding house in Gold Hill said you might need help with your place. Said your name was Isaiah Bridger." Willa forced herself to meet those unsettling blue eyes. "I'm willing to work. I can cook, clean, mend, tend animals. I learned fast." Isaiah studied her with an intensity that made her want to look away, but she held his gaze. She'd learned with Charles that showing weakness only invited pain. This man didn't have Charles's mean-eyed look, but she'd been fooled before by handsome faces. "You're the woman from Wyoming," he said finally. "The one they're saying burned her husband's house down." "I'm from Wyoming," Willa confirmed. "The house burned, but I'm no murderess, if that's what you're asking." "Didn't ask that." Isaiah leaned against the barn door, his posture relaxed, but his eyes still sharp. "Asked if you needed help." "I need work. I'm willing to earn my keep, nothing more." "What did he do?" The question came quietly, but it held weight. "What?" "Your husband. To deserve having his house burned down." Willa stared at this strange mountain man, who asked questions no one else had thought to ask. Everyone in Wyoming had assumed she was mad, vindictive, evil. Even the women who might have understood had kept their distance, afraid to be associated with such scandal. But this man, this Isaiah Bridger, stood in the fading light and asked what Charles had done to deserve it. Something inside her chest cracked open. "He hurt me," she said simply. "For 2 years he hurt me. Every day in some way, big or small. And when I finally fought back, when I told him I was leaving, he promised he'd kill me before he'd let me go. I believed him. So when he passed out drunk and knocked over the lamp, when the fire started, I didn't help him. I walked out the door and left him to whatever fate God decided. He was crawling toward the door when I rode away. Alive, cursing, threatening, but alive." Isaiah was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he straightened, his massive frame blocking out the setting sun. "Winter's coming hard to these mountains. I need help getting supplies in, preserving food, making sure everything's secure. It's hard work, long hours. I've got a spare room, built it for my mother before she passed. It's yours if you want it. Pay is room, board, and whatever else you need. Come spring, if you want to move on, I'll make sure you've got enough money to start fresh somewhere." Just like that, you don't know me. Know enough. Know you've got nowhere else to go, and I've got work that needs doing. No, you've got the look of someone who'll work hard and not complain. That's enough for me." He held out his hand, and Willa saw the calluses there, the scars of honest labor. "Do we have an agreement?" Willa took his hand. His grip was firm but careful, and she realized he was being gentle, aware of his own strength. "We have an agreement." "Good. You look about to fall over. Come inside, I'll get you fed, and show you the room." The interior of the cabin matched the exterior's quality. Wide plank floors, solid furniture built by skilled hands, a stone fireplace that dominated one wall. Everything was clean, but clearly needed a woman's organization books piled haphazardly, clothes draped over chairs, dishes stacked beside the basin. It was the home of a man who lived alone and saw no reason to fuss over details. Isaiah moved to the stove, stoking the fire with practiced efficiency. "Sit. I've got stew from yesterday. Just needs heating." Willa sank into a chair at the solid wood table, her body finally admitting its exhaustion. She watched Isaiah work, noting the way he moved through the space with economy and purpose. There was something peaceful about his presence, something that made the constant knot of fear in her stomach loosen slightly. "How long have you lived here?" she asked. "Built the cabin 5 years ago. Came out from Missouri after the war." He didn't elaborate on which side he'd fought for, and Willa didn't ask. The war had ended 11 years ago, but its divisions still ran deep. "You built all this yourself?" "Most of it. Had help with the barn raising. Few men from town came up. But the cabin, the other buildings, that was my work." He ladled stew into a bowl and set it before her with a chunk of bread. "Eat. You look half-starved." The food was simple but good, and Willa ate slowly, forcing herself not to gulp it down despite her hunger. Isaiah sat across from her with his own bowl, eating in comfortable silence. She appreciated that he didn't pepper her with questions, didn't demand her story in exchange for his kindness. "The room's back there," he said when they'd finished, gesturing to a door on the far side of the cabin. "Has a bed, dresser, chair. Nothing fancy, but it's clean and warm. There's a lock on the inside of the door." He met her eyes, his expression serious. "You're safe here, miss. I didn't catch your last name." "Ashford. Willa Ashford. Though I'd prefer not to use that name anymore if it's all the same to you." "What would you prefer?" "My maiden name. Aldridge. Willa Aldridge." Isaiah nodded. "Miss Aldridge, then. You're safe here. I give you my word on that. The lock's yours to use or not, but I want you to know it's there. I don't enter a woman's private space uninvited." The tears that sprang to Willa's eyes were unexpected, and she blinked them back furiously. Such a simple thing, such a basic courtesy. But from Charles, she'd never had even that much respect. Her room, her possessions, her very body all had been subject to his whims and invasions. "Thank you," she whispered. "No thanks needed. It's just decency." He stood collecting the bowls. "Get some rest. We can talk about work in the morning. There's water in the pitcher, and if you need anything, just call out. I'm a light sleeper." The room was as promised, simple but clean, with a real bed covered in quilts that looked hand-stitched. Willa closed the door and, after a moment's hesitation, turned the lock. The click of it sliding home felt like the most beautiful sound she'd ever heard. She collapsed onto the bed fully clothed and was asleep before she could wonder if she'd made a terrible mistake trusting a strange mountain man in the wilderness. Morning came with the smell of coffee and bacon, and Willa woke disoriented, her heart pounding. For a moment she didn't know where she was. Only that light was streaming through a window, and she could hear someone moving around. Then memory returned the climb, Isaiah, the offer of safety and work. She sat up slowly, her body aching from yesterday's exertion. Her dress was a disaster, singed and stained beyond redemption. It was the only thing she owned besides her worn boots and her determination. A soft knock on the door made her tense. "Miss Aldrich? I've left some things outside your door. Clothes that might fit. They were my mother's. She'd want them used." Willa waited until she heard his footsteps retreat before opening the door. A neat stack of clothing sat on the floor, 2 dresses, a skirt and blouse, a warm shawl, even undergarments. Everything was clean and carefully folded. Beneath the clothes was a pair of sturdy boots that looked barely worn. She gathered everything quickly and retreated back into her room, closing the door. The dress she chose was simple calico, faded blue with tiny white flowers. It fit reasonably well, a bit loose in the shoulders and short in the hem, but infinitely better than her ruined garment. The boots were only slightly too large. She could stuff them with cloth to make them work. When she emerged, Isaiah was at the stove, his back to her. He'd clearly been up for hours, his hair was damp from washing, and he'd shaved the stubble from his jaw, revealing the strong lines of his face more clearly. He turned at the sound of her door, and something flickered in his eyes when he saw her, though his expression remained neutral. "Coffee's hot. Breakfast is almost ready." Willa poured herself a cup, savoring the bitter warmth. Real coffee, not the chicory stretched brew Charles had insisted on. "Thank you for the clothes. I'll work to pay you back for them." They were sitting in a trunk, doing nobody any good. Ma would be happy to see them used. He plated eggs and bacon with bread, setting a plate before her. "Eat up. I thought we'd start with the garden today. Need to harvest what's left and get everything preserved. Then we'll move to the animals. I've got chickens, 2 cows, a handful of goats, and a mule. They're all easy enough to work with. I've never preserved food before. Charles had a cook, a woman from town who came in daily. Willa hadn't been allowed in the kitchen. Charles had said she was too stupid to be trusted with anything important. "I'll teach you. It's not complicated, just takes time and attention." Isaiah sat down with his own plate. "Most of surviving up here is just being prepared and patient. You seem like you've got both those qualities in abundance." They worked together through the morning, and Willa discovered that Isaiah was a patient teacher. He showed her how to harvest the last of the root vegetables, how to check which squash were ready, how to identify herbs that could be dried for winter use. His hands were gentle with the plants, and he explained everything clearly, never making her feel foolish for not knowing. "You've got a good touch with growing things," he observed as they carried baskets of vegetables back to the cabin. "Natural feel for it. My mother had a garden before she died. I helped her when I was young." Willa hadn't thought about those days in years, the happy times before her father drank himself to death and left her orphaned at 16. Vulnerable to Charles's seemingly respectable courtship. What happened to her? "Fever when I was 14. My father followed her 2 years later. Then I was alone." She paused, wondering why she was telling this stranger her history. Charles seemed like salvation at the time. A respectable merchant, established, older. I thought I was lucky he'd chosen me. "How old were you when you married him?" 18. He was 43. Everyone said what a good match it was, how fortunate I was. Bitterness crept into her voice. They didn't see what happened behind closed doors. And when they did see the bruises, the burns, they looked away. Told me marriage was sacred. Told me to be a better wife. Isaiah's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. I stayed for 2 years because I had nowhere else to go. No money, no family, no prospects. And he made sure I knew that if I left, he'd find me. He had friends, business connections. He said no one would help me, and he was right. Until the fire. She set down her basket, staring at her hands. When that lamp fell and the flame started spreading, I stood there for a moment. Just stood there and watched. And I thought, this is God's judgment. This is justice. So I walked out. You said he made it out alive? He was crawling toward the door when I rode away, cursing me, threatening what he'd do when he caught me. I don't know what happened after. I didn't look back. Isaiah was quiet for a long moment, his blue eyes studying her face. If he died, that's on him and his own choices, not on you. The law might not see it that way. The law's not here right now, and even if someone came looking, they'd have to get through me first. He said it matter-of-factly, as if it were the most natural thing in the world to stand between her and danger. Willa's throat tightened. Why would you do that? You don't know me. Know enough. Know you've been hurt and you're trying to survive. Know you're willing to work hard for a fresh start. That's all I need to know. He picked up his basket again. Come on, these vegetables won't preserve themselves. The afternoon passed in the companionable rhythm of work. Isaiah taught her how to pickle vegetables, how to dry herbs, how to render fat for soap making. He worked beside her, his large hands surprisingly deft with the small tasks, and Willa found herself relaxing in his presence. He didn't hover or criticize. He simply worked and let her work, offering guidance when needed, but otherwise letting her find her own way. As the sun began to set, they stood on the porch surveying their day's accomplishments. Jars of preserved vegetables lined the shelves in the cool room. Herbs hung drying from the rafters, and the garden had been thoroughly harvested. You did good work today, Isaiah said. Real good work. You did most of it. No, we did it together. That's how things work up here. Everyone pulls their weight. Everyone contributes. He glanced at her, and in the fading light, his eyes seemed softer. You belong here as much as anyone, Willa. Don't forget that. It was the first time he'd used her given name, and something about the way he said it, gentle, respectful, made her chest ache with an emotion she couldn't quite name. This man, this virtual stranger, had given her more dignity in one day than Charles had in 2 years of marriage. Thank you, she said quietly, for everything. Like I said, just decency. But there was a warmth in his voice that belied the casual words. The days fell into a pattern. Willa rose with the sun, dressed in one of her gifted dresses, and emerged to find Isaiah already working. They'd eat breakfast together, then spend the day preparing the homestead for winter. There were endless tasks more preserving, repairing the barn roof, reinforcing the chicken coop against predators, chopping and stacking wood until Willa's arms ached. Isaiah never shirked the harder tasks, never expected her to do more than she was capable of. But he also never treated her as fragile. When she struggled with the weight of a water bucket, he showed her a better way to carry it rather than simply taking it from her. When she couldn't reach something high, he brought her a stool rather than doing it himself. He was teaching her self-sufficiency, she realized, giving her the tools to survive rather than making her dependent. In the evenings, they'd sit by the fire, Isaiah reading or working on carving projects, while Willa mended clothes or practiced her letters. She'd learned to read as a child, but Charles had discouraged it, saying women had no need for books. Isaiah's cabin was full of books, and he told her she was welcome to any of them. Where did you learn to build like this? She asked one evening, watching him shape a piece of wood with careful knife strokes. My father was a carpenter. Started teaching me when I was 6 years old. Said a man who could work with his hands would never go hungry. Isaiah's expression grew distant. He died at Shiloh. Never got to see me grown. I'm sorry. Long time ago now. He turned the wood, examining his work. After the war, I couldn't settle back into town life. Too many people, too much noise. Needed space to breathe. Found it here. Don't you get lonely? Isaiah looked at her then, something unreadable in his eyes. Sometimes. But lonely's better than being around the wrong people. At least, that's what I used to think. Used to? He didn't answer, returning his attention to his carving. But Willa caught the slight color on his cheeks, visible even in the firelight, and felt a responding warmth in her own chest. She was growing comfortable here, she realized. Too comfortable, perhaps. Every morning she woke without dread. Every meal passed without criticism or cruelty. Every day she felt herself growing stronger, both in body and spirit. Isaiah's steady presence was like bedrock solid, reliable, safe. But safety was an illusion, she reminded herself. Charles could still be alive. Even if he wasn't, someone might come looking for her. She couldn't afford to let her guard down completely, couldn't afford to care too much about this place or the man who'd given her shelter. The problem was, she was already starting to care. 3 weeks into her stay, the first snow fell. Willa woke to a world transformed, everything white and silent and beautiful. She pressed her face to the window like a child, watching the flakes drift down through the pine trees. When she emerged from her room, Isaiah was at the window too, his expression unreadable as he stared out at the snow. "Winter's coming early this year," he said. "Good thing we prepared." They spent the day working in and around the cabin, feeding the animals in their warm barn, checking that all the buildings were secure. The snow continued to fall, soft and steady, until the world was muffled and white. That evening, as they sat by the fire, Isaiah seemed restless. He'd get up, pace to the window, stare out at the snow, then return to his chair, only to repeat the process minutes later. "What's wrong?" Willa finally asked. "Nothing. Just..." He ran a hand through his hair. "Town will be cut off soon. Snow gets deep here, makes travel difficult. I was thinking I should make one last trip down, get any final supplies we might need. We seem well stocked. We are. But there's the telegraph office. If you wanted to send word to anyone, let people know you're safe, now would be the time." Willa's stomach clenched. "There's no one to contact. No one who'd care where I am." "What about the law? If you're innocent of anything, maybe you should..." "Should what? Turn myself into authorities who'd believe Charles over me? Who'd say I tried to murder him and failed?" She stood abruptly, her calm fracturing. "I have no proof of what he did to me. No witnesses who'd speak up. Just my word against his. And he's a respected merchant while I'm nothing. A woman who set fire to her husband's house. You said he made it out alive." "I said he was crawling toward the door. I don't know what happened after." Fear made her voice sharp. "For all I know, he died in that fire. And even if he lived, he's probably told everyone I tried to kill him. Either way, I'm guilty in their eyes." Isaiah stood too, moving toward her slowly. "Willa, you can't run forever. Watch me." She turned away, wrapping her arms around herself. "I'll work through the winter like we agreed. Come spring, I'll move on, find somewhere else. I'm good at disappearing now. Is that what you want? To keep running?" "What I want doesn't matter. It's what I have to do." "That's not true." His voice came from right behind her now, close but not touching. "You've got choices now. You're safe here. You don't have to run. Until someone comes looking. Until Charles or the law or someone finds me. Then what? You get arrested for harboring a fugitive? Your life gets destroyed because you helped me? She turned to face him, surprised by how close he was. I won't do that to you. You've been too kind. Isaiah's blue eyes held hers, intense and unwavering. I'm not afraid of whoever might come looking, and I don't regret helping you. Not for a second. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you're strong and brave, and you've survived things that would have broken most people. I know you work hard and don't complain. I know you deserve better than what you got from that bastard you married. His voice dropped lower. And I know that having you here these past weeks has made this place feel less like hiding and more like home. Willa's breath caught. The way he was looking at her, the warmth in his voice, it was dangerous. She couldn't let herself feel these things, couldn't let herself hope for something that could never be. Isaiah, I can't. I'm not asking for anything, he said quietly. Just stating facts. You make this place better. You make me. He paused, seeming to struggle for words. You make me remember there's good in the world. That's all. I wanted you to know. Before she could respond, he stepped back, putting safe distance between them again. I'll head down to town tomorrow. Check the telegraph. Make sure no one's come asking questions. If it's clear, you can relax a bit. If there's trouble, we'll figure it out. Together. Why are you doing this? Isaiah smiled, a sad sort of expression that made him look younger. Because someone should have done it a long time ago. Because you deserve help. Because... He shrugged. Because it's the right thing to do. And I'm tired of standing by while wrong things happen. He left her standing by the fire, retreating to his own room with a quiet good night. Willa sank into her chair, her mind spinning. She couldn't let herself care for him. It wasn't safe. It wasn't fair to either of them. But as she sat there in the warmth of the cabin he'd built with his own hands, feeling safer than she'd felt in years, she knew it was already too late. She cared. God help her, she cared. Isaiah left at dawn, riding his sturdy mountain horse down toward Gold Hill through the fresh snow. Willa watched him go from the window, anxiety knotting her stomach. What if someone was looking for her? What if the telegraph had brought news from Wyoming? What if this was the end of her brief peace? She forced herself to work through the day, feeding the animals, baking bread, organizing the supplies in the cool room. Anything to keep her hands busy and her mind occupied. But fear was a constant companion, whispering possibilities, each worse than the last. It was nearly dark when she heard the horse returning. Willa stood on the porch, her shawl wrapped tight against the cold, watching Isaiah emerge from the tree line. His face was grave, and her heart sank. What did you learn? He dismounted slowly, tying his horse before turning to face her. There was a telegraph 3 days ago, from a sheriff in Cheyenne. Willa's legs went weak. What did it say? Said Charles Ashford died 2 weeks after his house burned. Said his widow was wanted for questioning in his death. Asked if anyone matching your description had passed through. Isaiah's expression was hard to read. The clerk remembered you coming through town. He'd already sent a reply saying you'd been seen heading west. So they're coming for me. It wasn't a question. Maybe. Probably. But Willa, there's more. He climbed the porch steps, standing close enough that she could see the tension in his jaw. I talked to the clerk, got him to show me the full message. Charles didn't die in the fire. He died 2 weeks later from what they're calling poisoning. They're saying you poisoned him before you left, that the fire was meant to cover it up. Willa stared at him in shock. That's impossible. I never. I know you didn't. But someone wants people to think you did. Who would? Understanding dawned, cold and terrible. His business partner, Robert Thorne. He and Charles were in debt, bad debt to some dangerous people. Charles told me about it once when he was drunk. Said Thorne wanted to sell the business, but Charles refused. If Charles died and I was blamed, Thorne would get everything. Isaiah's eyes narrowed. Can you prove any of that? No. It was just drunken rambling. I have no evidence, no proof. Just like I have no proof of what Charles did to me. Despair washed over her. They'll hang me, won't they? For a murder I didn't commit, after 2 years of surviving a man who tried to kill me every day in smaller ways. No one's hanging you. Isaiah's voice was fierce. I won't let that happen. You can't stop the law. I can sure as hell try. He took her shoulders gently, waiting until she met his eyes. Listen to me. We've got time. Snow's getting deeper, which means travel's getting harder. If anyone's coming from Wyoming, they won't make it through these mountains until spring at earliest. That gives us months to figure this out. Figure what out? I'm guilty until proven innocent, and I can't prove anything. Then we find someone who can. We wait out the winter, and come spring, we head to Wyoming. We talk to people who knew Charles and Thorne. We find evidence of the debt, of Thorne's motive. We prove your innocence. That's insane. You can't. I can, and I will. His hands were warm on her shoulders, his presence solid and real. You're not alone in this, Willa. Not anymore. She wanted to argue, to tell him he was risking too much, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, tears spilled down her cheeks, hot and unexpected. Isaiah pulled her into his arms without hesitation, and Willa let herself collapse against his broad chest, let herself feel safe for just a moment while terror crashed over her. I've got you, he murmured against her hair. I promise I've got you. Winter descended in earnest, and with it came a strange sort of peace. The world beyond the cabin ceased to exist, reduced to what they could see through the windows, snow, trees, sky. No one could reach them here, and they couldn't leave. They were isolated, alone together in a small world of their own making. Willa discovered she didn't mind the isolation. There was something freeing about it, something that let her breathe easier. No one watching, no one judging, no one threatening. Just her and Isaiah, working together to survive the mountain winter. They fell into an even closer routine. Morning chores, breakfast, various tasks around the homestead. Afternoons they spent working on individual projects, Isaiah on his woodwork, Willa on sewing new clothes for herself or reading from his collection of books. Evenings by the fire, talking about everything and nothing. She learned about his life before the war, a childhood in Missouri, a family of craftsmen, a sister who died of scarlet fever when she was 10. She learned about his war years, though he spoke of them reluctantly and only in pieces. She learned about his decision to come west, to build something with his own hands, to live on his own terms. In return, she told him about her own childhood happy, until her mother's death, difficult after. About meeting Charles, about the early warning signs she'd ignored because she'd been desperate for security. About the slow erosion of herself under his cruelty, the way she'd become smaller and quieter and more afraid with each passing day. I used to sing, she said one evening, surprising herself with the memory. My mother taught me. I had a nice voice, she said. I'd sing while I worked, while I cooked, all the time. Charles hated it, said it gave him headaches. After the first time he hit me for singing, I never did it again. Isaiah's hand stilled on his carving. Would you sing now? I don't know if I remember how. Try, if you want to. Willa hesitated, then softly began an old ballad her mother had loved. Her voice was rusty, uncertain at first, but as the melody returned to her, it grew stronger. Isaiah sat quietly, listening, and when she finished, his eyes were bright. "That was beautiful," he said. "Don't stop singing, Willa. Not for anyone, not ever again." As November turned to December, something shifted between them. Willa noticed the way Isaiah's gaze would linger on her when he thought she wasn't looking. The way he'd find excuses to stand close, to brush against her hand when passing something, to sit nearer on the evenings by the fire. She noticed because she was doing the same things, drawn to him in ways that both frightened and thrilled her. She'd been married, but she'd never been courted. Charles had simply decided he wanted her, and her father's debts had made her agreement a foregone conclusion. She'd never experienced the slow dance of attraction, the building anticipation, the sweet tension of wondering if someone felt the same way you did. It was intoxicating. It was terrifying. "Tell me about the woman you built the second room for," Willa asked one evening, watching him shape a new piece of wood. "Your mother." "Not much to tell. She was a good woman, strong. Raised me and my sister alone after Pa died. Worked herself to the bone to keep us fed and clothed." Isaiah's knife moved in smooth, practiced strokes. "When I came out here, I wanted to bring her. Thought she deserved some peace after all those hard years. Built that room special for her, made everything just right. But she died before she could make the trip. Fever, same as took my sister. I'm sorry." "Me too. She would have liked it here. Would have liked you, I think." He glanced up, a small smile on his face. "You're like her in some ways. Tough. Doesn't give up, even when things get hard. I feel like all I've done is give up. I ran away from my problems. You survived. That's not giving up. That's choosing to live. There's a big difference." He set down his carving, giving her his full attention. "My ma used to say that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from something that's killing you. Said it takes more courage to start over than to stay in a bad situation out of fear or pride." She sounds wise. She was. Isaiah's expression grew thoughtful. "She'd be glad I'm helping you. She always believed in standing up for people who couldn't stand up for themselves." "I can stand up for myself now," Willa said quietly. "You've helped me remember how." The look he gave her was warm enough to heat her from the inside out. "Good. You should never forget that you're strong. Charles tried to break you, but he failed. You're still here, still fighting. That's something to be proud of." Willa had to look away from the intensity in his eyes, her heart pounding. She was falling for him, she realized. Had been falling for weeks, maybe from that first day when he'd asked what Charles had done to deserve having his house burned down. Every kindness, every moment of respect, every gentle word had worn away her defenses until she was completely exposed. Vulnerable in ways she'd sworn she'd never be again. The terrifying part was that she didn't want to stop falling. Christmas approached, and Isaiah surprised her by bringing in a small pine tree, setting it up in the corner of the cabin. "Ma always insisted on a tree," he explained. "Said it made the place feel festive. Thought we could continue the tradition." They decorated it with strings of berries and popcorn, small carved figures Isaiah had made, bits of ribbon from Willa's sewing basket. It looked cheerful and homey, filling the cabin with a scent of pine. "I don't have a gift for you," Willa said on Christmas morning, feeling suddenly awkward. She'd been so focused on survival. She hadn't thought about gifts. "Don't need one." Isaiah handed her a small package wrapped in cloth. but I made you something, if you'll accept it." Inside was a carved wooden box, small enough to fit in her palm. The lid bore an intricate pattern of flowers and vines, so detailed it must have taken hours. Inside, lined with soft leather, was space for small treasures. "It's beautiful," Willa breathed, running her fingers over the carving. "Isaiah, this is too much. Wanted you to have something that was yours. Something precious, to keep precious things in. When you're ready to have precious things again." The meaning behind his words made her eyes sting. "Thank you. I'll treasure it always. There's something else." He seemed nervous suddenly, his confidence wavering. "I wasn't sure if I should, but I figured you could always say no." He handed her another package, larger this time. Inside was a dress, but not one from his mother's trunk. This was new fabric, deep green wool with black trim, cut in the current fashion. It was beautiful, clearly expensive, and it must have cost him considerably. "When did you—" "Ordered it last time I was in town, back in October, before the first snow. Had the seamstress make it to what I thought were your measurements." He rubbed the back of his neck, embarrassed. "Wanted you to have something that was yours, not hand-me-downs, something that made you feel pretty." Willa held the dress to her chest, overwhelmed. Charles had never given her gifts, only demands. But Isaiah had thought of her, had planned this, had spent money he probably couldn't easily spare to give her something beautiful just because he wanted her to have it. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll wear it tonight. I'm making a special dinner." Isaiah's smile was hopeful. "We should celebrate properly." She changed in her room, marveling at how well the dress fit. The green brought out the color in her eyes, and the cut was flattering without being immodest. She'd lost weight during her time with Charles and the hard weeks after, but work with Isaiah had put healthy muscle back on her frame. She looked, she realized with some surprise, good, like a woman instead of a ghost. When she emerged, Isaiah froze in the act of setting the table. His eyes widened, and for a long moment, he just stared. "Willa, you're—" He swallowed hard. "You look beautiful." She felt her cheeks warm. "The dress is beautiful. Thank you for it." "The dress is just cloth. You're what makes it beautiful." He seemed to realize what he'd said, and looked away quickly, busying himself with dinner preparations. "Food's almost ready." The meal was special roasted chicken with vegetables, fresh bread, even a small cake he must have made while she was occupied elsewhere. They ate by candlelight, the tree glowing in the corner, snow falling softly outside the windows. It felt magical, intimate in ways that made Willa's pulse race. After dinner, they sat by the fire, closer than usual. Isaiah had poured them each a small glass of whiskey, and the warmth of it combined with the warmth of the fire made everything feel soft and dreamlike. "This is the best Christmas I've had in years," Willa said softly. "Maybe the best ever." "Me too." Isaiah's voice was rough. "Having you here, it's changed everything. Made me realize how much I was just existing before, not really living." "I know what you mean. I feel more alive now than I did the entire time I was married." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the fire. Willa was intensely aware of Isaiah beside her, of the solid warmth of him, of the way his shoulder nearly touched hers. She wanted to lean into him, to close that last small distance, but fear held her back. "Willa." Isaiah's voice was quiet. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "If things were different, if there was no trouble from Wyoming, no questions about Charles's death, nothing to run from, would you stay here? Would you want to stay?" Her heart thundered. Yes, she whispered. I'd want to stay. Isaiah turned to face her, his blue eyes intense in the firelight. Why? Because I feel safe here. Because I'm happier than I've been in years. Because you... She trailed off, unable to finish. Because I what? He leaned closer, and Willa's breath caught. Because you make me feel like I matter. Like I'm worth something more than what I can provide, or how quietly I can endure. You see me, really see me, and you don't find me lacking. The words tumbled out in a rush. Because when I'm with you, I'm not afraid. Because you're kind and strong and good, and being near you makes me want to be brave. Isaiah's hand came up slowly, giving her time to pull away. But she didn't move. His fingers brushed her cheek, gentle as a whisper. Willa, you're the bravest person I've ever met, and you matter more than you know. To this place. To me. Isaiah, I know the timing's wrong. I know you've got 1,000 reasons to be cautious. But I need you to know. He paused, seeming to gather courage. I care about you. More than I probably should. More than is wise. But I can't help it. Having you here, it's the best thing that's happened to me since I came to this mountain. Maybe the best thing that's ever happened to me. Willa's eyes filled with tears. I care about you too. So much it scares me. Why does it scare you? Because everything good in my life has been taken away. My mother, my father, my freedom, my sense of self. I'm afraid if I let myself have this, have you, something will happen. Charles will reach out from the grave and destroy it. Or the law will come. Or nothing. Or we get to be happy, despite everything. Isaiah's thumb brushed away a tear that had escaped. I can't promise nothing bad will ever happen. But I can promise I'll fight for this, for you, for us. Whatever comes, we'll face it together. You barely know me. I know you've spent every day for weeks working beside me, never complaining, always finding ways to help. I know you sing while you cook, and you're gentle with the animals, and you read books by the fire like they're precious treasures. I know you're strong and scared and hopeful all at once. I know that when you smile, really smile, it lights up this whole cabin. He leaned closer still, his voice dropping to barely more than a whisper. And I know that I'm falling in love with you, Willa Aldridge. Have been since that first day when you stood in my yard and asked what Charles had done to deserve having his house burned down. Willa couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Isaiah was so close now she could feel the warmth of his breath on her face, could see the golden flecks in his blue eyes. He was giving her every chance to pull away, to say no, to reject what he was offering. But she didn't want to pull away. She wanted this, wanted him, with an intensity that shook her to her core. I'm falling in love with you too, she whispered. I didn't want to. I tried not to, but I can't help it. Isaiah's smile was like sunrise. Can I kiss you? In answer, Willa closed the last small distance between them. His lips were soft against hers, gentle and questioning, and she responded with a hunger she didn't know she possessed. This was nothing like the cruel, demanding kisses Charles had forced on her. This was warmth and tenderness and promise. A kiss that spoke of new beginnings and hope. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Isaiah rested his forehead against hers. I promise I'll take care of you, he said quietly. I'll keep you safe, help you prove your innocence, and make sure nothing ever hurts you again. That's my vow to you, Willa, for as long as you'll have me. That might be a very long time, she said, smiling through her tears. Good. He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Willa felt something inside her that had been frozen for years begin to thaw. That's exactly what I was hoping. They sat by the fire late into the night, holding each other, talking and kissing and dreaming about a future that seemed suddenly possible. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in white, isolating them from everything that threatened. For now, they were safe. For now, they were together. For now, that was enough. The winter days passed in a haze of contentment. Willa and Isaiah worked together as before. But now there were stolen kisses between tasks, hands held while sitting by the fire, arms around each other as they stood on the porch watching sunsets. They were courting, Willa realized, doing all the sweet things she'd never experienced with Charles. Isaiah was endlessly patient, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. When she woke screaming from nightmares of Charles, Isaiah would hold her until the trembling stopped, stroking her hair and murmuring reassurances. When she flinched at sudden movements, he'd slow down, move more carefully, give her space to remember she was safe. "I hate that I'm like this," she said one morning after jerking away from him, reaching for a plate. "I hate that he's still in my head. He won't be forever. Healing takes time." Isaiah handed her the plate slowly, carefully. "And there's nothing wrong with you, Willa. You survived something terrible. Your body's just trying to keep you safe the only way it knows how. What if I'm always like this? What if I can never be normal?" "There's no such thing as normal. There's just being human, and humans carry their scars. Doesn't make you broken." He turned her gently to face him. "I've got my own scars from the war. Still can't stand loud noises. They remind me of cannons, gunfire. Sometimes I wake up thinking I'm back in a trench. We're all a little damaged. Willa, that doesn't make us less worthy of love." His words settled something anxious in her chest. "How did you get to be so wise?" "Years of practice being broken and figuring out I was worth putting back together." He kissed her forehead. "You're worth it too. Never doubt that." As January gave way to February, Willa found herself thinking more about the future. Spring would come eventually, and with it, decisions. They couldn't hide on the mountain forever. The questions about Charles's death wouldn't simply disappear. But the thought of leaving this place, of leaving Isaiah, was unbearable. "What if we can't prove I didn't poison him?" she asked one evening. They were lying on a rug before the fire, Willa's head on Isaiah's chest, his arms around her. "What if we go to Wyoming, and they arrest me immediately? Then I'll break you out and we'll head for California, or Canada, somewhere they can't reach us." "I'm serious." "So am I." He stroked her hair absently. "I won't let them take you, Willa. I don't care what I have to do. You're mine now, and I protect what's mine." The possessiveness in his voice should have frightened her, but instead it sent warmth flooding through her. She'd never been claimed before, not like this, not as something precious rather than property. Isaiah's protection didn't diminish her. It fortified her. "We need a real plan," she said. "We need to think this through." "All right, let's think it through." Isaiah shifted so he could see her face. "What do you know about Robert Thorne? Where he lived? Who his associates were? Anything that might help?" "He lived in Cheyenne, too. Had an office near Charles's. They were in business together, importing goods mostly. But Charles said they were overextended, owed money to dangerous people. Gambling debts, I think, though Charles never gave me details." "Gambling debts mean there's a record somewhere. People who gave them money, people who wanted it back. If Thorne was desperate enough to kill Charles and frame you, someone must have been pressuring him." But how do we find these people? How do we prove any of this? We start by talking to the sheriff, explaining what you know about the debt. Then we find Thorne. See if we can get him to slip up. If he's guilty, he'll be nervous, might make mistakes. Isaiah's expression was grim. And if talking doesn't work, there are other ways to get the truth out of people. I don't want you doing anything illegal for me. Too late. I'm already harboring a fugitive. He smiled at her alarmed expression. I'm joking, mostly. Point is, I'll do what needs doing, but we'll try the lawful approach first. They spent the rest of the winter planning. Isaiah made a list of everything Willa could remember about Charles's business, about Thorne, about the people they associated with. It wasn't much, but it was a start. They talked through scenarios, planned for contingencies, tried to anticipate every possible outcome. Even if we prove Thorne killed him, I'm still guilty of abandoning Charles in the fire, Willa pointed out. That might be enough to convict me of something. You left your abuser when he was still alive and mobile. That's not a crime. That's self-preservation. Any reasonable judge would see that. But will they? I'm a woman who defied her husband, who ran away from her marriage. Society doesn't look kindly on that, even when the husband is a monster. Isaiah's jaw tightened. Then society can go to hell. We'll find a way, Willa. I promise. In the quiet moments between planning, they simply existed together. Isaiah taught Willa to shoot, standing behind her as she aimed his rifle at targets he'd set up, his arms around hers, his breath warm on her neck. She taught him to dance, humming songs her mother had sung while they swayed together in the small space of the cabin. They read to each other in the evenings, taking turns with books from his collection, and slowly, carefully, Willa's fear of intimacy began to ease. Isaiah never demanded, never pushed, but his patience and gentleness wore away her defenses. A touch became a caress, a kiss became many, until the night she took his hand and led him to her room, closing the door behind them. Are you sure? He asked, his voice rough with desire, but his eyes concerned. We don't have to, I'm sure. And she was. For the first time in her life, she was choosing this, choosing him with full agency and no fear. I want this, Isaiah. I want you. What passed between them that night was tender and passionate. Nothing like the cold transactions Charles had demanded. Isaiah worshipped her body with gentle hands and patient kisses, taking time to learn what she liked, constantly checking that she was all right. When she trembled, he held her. When she cried from the overwhelming sweetness of it, he kissed away her tears, and when it was over, he held her close and told her he loved her, over and over, until she believed it in her bones. I never knew it could be like this, she whispered against his chest. I thought it was always just endurance. Not with someone who loves you. Not when it's done right. Isaiah's arms tightened around her. This is how it should always be, Willa. Equal and wanted and good. She fell asleep in his arms, safe and loved and whole in ways she'd never been before. March arrived with the first signs of spring snow beginning to melt, days growing longer, birds returning to the mountain. The world was waking up, and with it came the knowledge that their isolation was ending. Soon the passes would be clear. Soon they would have to face Wyoming and whatever waited there. We should leave by mid-April, Isaiah said one morning, studying the sky. That gives the worst of the melt time to pass, but gets us there before Thorne might think to leave town. What if he's already gone? Then we'll track him down. Men like that leave trails. Willa wrapped her arms around herself, fear returning. I'm scared, Isaiah. I know. I am too. He pulled her close, his solid presence as comforting as ever. But we'll face it together. And no matter what happens, you're not going back to being afraid. I won't allow it. You can't control everything. Maybe not. But I can control this. You're never alone again. Whatever comes, I'm right beside you. That's not changing. He tilted her face up to his. Marry me, Willa. She stared at him, shocked. What? Marry me. Here, now, before we leave. I know it's fast. I know we've only been together a few months. But I also know I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you. I want to spend the rest of my life protecting you, caring for you, building a life with you. His expression was fierce with emotion. And if the worst happens in Wyoming, if things go wrong, I want you to have my name. I want you to have legal claim to this place, to everything I own. I want to make sure you're protected, no matter what. Tears streamed down Willa's face. Isaiah, I'm still married. Charles died, but I don't know if there was ever an official. You're a widow. Charles is dead, which means you're free. We'll get whatever papers we need, make it all legal. He took her hands in his. I'm not asking you to be my property, Willa. I'm asking you to be my partner, my equal. I'm asking you to build a life with me, if you'll have me. Yes. The word came out choked with tears, but it was the easiest answer she'd ever given. Yes, Isaiah, I'll marry you. His kiss was deep and claiming, full of promise. When they broke apart, both smiling through tears, Isaiah rested his forehead against hers. We'll do it right. I'll ride down to Gold Hill tomorrow. Bring back whoever can perform the ceremony. We'll make it official before we leave for Wyoming. What if the law's already looking for me there? Then we'll deal with it. But you're going to be my wife, Willa. That's happening no matter what. 2 days later, Isaiah returned with a minister from Gold Hill, an older man who asked few questions and seemed content to perform the ceremony for a generous payment. They stood in the cabin Willa had come to love, in front of the fireplace where they'd shared so many evenings, and spoke their vows. Isaiah had carved her a ring from a piece of mountain ash, simple but beautiful. He slipped it onto her finger with hands that shook slightly, his voice rough with emotion as he promised to love and cherish her all his days. Willa spoke her own vows through tears, promising to stand beside him through whatever came, to build a life worthy of the love he'd shown her. When the minister pronounced them married, Isaiah kissed her like he was claiming something precious and forever. Willa kissed him back, pouring everything she felt into it, gratitude, love, hope, determination. She was Willa Bridger now. She had a new name, a new life, a new chance. Whatever came next, she wouldn't face it alone. The journey to Wyoming took 2 weeks. They traveled carefully, avoiding main routes, camping in secluded spots. Isaiah was constantly alert, his rifle always within reach, his eyes scanning for threats. But the journey was uneventful, and they reached Cheyenne in late April with no trouble. The town looked just as Willa remembered, and the sight of it made her stomach churn. So many terrible memories here, so much pain. But Isaiah's hand found hers, squeezing gently, reminding her she wasn't the same woman who'd fled in the night. She was stronger now. She had someone who believed in her. Sheriff's office first, Isaiah said. We do this right, above board. The sheriff was a weathered man in his 50s, his eyes sharp as he studied them. Help you folks? My name's Isaiah Bridger. This is my wife, Willa. She used to be Willa Ashford. The sheriff's expression shifted, became wary. The woman wanted for questioning in Charles Ashford's death. The woman wrongly accused of poisoning a man who died from his own drinking and poor choices. Isaiah corrected, his voice hard. We're here to clear her name. That's so? You got evidence? We've got Willa's testimony about Charles's business partner, Robert Thorne, and the debt they were in. We've got reason to believe Thorne killed Charles to cover his own involvement in fraud and to steal the business. Isaiah met the sheriff's gaze squarely. We're willing to cooperate fully with your investigation, but I need your word my wife won't be arrested without cause. Can't make promises like that. Then we'll take our information to the territorial marshal or to a lawyer. But one way or another, the truth's coming out. Isaiah's hand rested casually on his gun belt, not threatening, but making his capability clear. We came here to do this right, Sheriff. You going to help us? Or do we need to find someone who will? The sheriff studied them for a long moment, then sighed. All right. Tell me what you know. They spent an hour laying out everything the debt Charles had mentioned, Thorne's desperation, the convenient timing of Charles's death so soon after Willa left. The sheriff listened, taking notes, his expression growing thoughtful. Thorne's still in town, he said finally. Took over Charles's business, like you said. Been living high, paying off debts left and right. I'll admit, I thought it was strange. Business was supposedly failing, but suddenly he's flush with cash. Insurance? Isaiah suggested. Maybe. Or maybe he's been skimming for years and used Charles's death as cover to access funds he couldn't reach before. The sheriff leaned back in his chair. I'll bring him in for questioning. If your story holds up, Mrs. Bridger, we'll dig deeper. But I can't promise anything. That's all we're asking, Willa said quietly. Just a fair chance. Over the next week, the sheriff investigated. He brought in Thorne, questioned him extensively, dug into the business records. And slowly, a picture emerged. Charles and Thorne had been embezzling from their own company, gambling with funds that belonged to investors. When the debts came due, Thorne had panicked. He'd poisoned Charles's whiskey, the same whiskey Charles drank every night, then waited for the fire Willa set to provide cover. But Willa hadn't set the fire. Charles had, in his drunken carelessness. Thorne's plan had worked anyway, and he'd used the scandal around Willa to divert attention from his own guilt. The evidence was damning once the sheriff knew where to look. Bank records showed large transfers just before Charles died. Thorne had been seen purchasing arsenic from a chemist, claiming it was for rats. Witnesses came forward saying Thorne had been desperate to get Charles to sell, had argued with him publicly just days before his death. It took 3 weeks, but finally the sheriff arrested Thorne for Charles Ashford's murder. Willa's name was cleared, all charges dropped. She was free. I can't believe it's over, she said that night in the hotel room Isaiah had rented. They were leaving for Nevada in the morning. This chapter of her life finally closed. I'm actually free. You've been free since the night you left Charles, Isaiah said, pulling her into his arms. But now everyone knows it. Now there's no shadow hanging over you. Over us, she corrected. You were under that shadow too because of me. Best shadow I've ever stood in. He kissed her softly. Come on, let's go home. They returned to the mountain cabin in mid-May, and everything looked fresh and new with spring growth. Willa stood on the porch, breathing in the pine-scented air, feeling peace settle into her bones. Home, she said softly. I'm home. Isaiah's arms came around her from behind, his chin resting on her head. Our home, for as long as you want it. Forever sounds about right. They settled back into their routine, but now without fear or shadows. The garden was planted with enthusiasm. The animals tended with joy. Willa sang while she worked, her voice growing stronger every day. Isaiah built new furniture for the cabin, including a cradle, because Willa had realized during the journey back from Wyoming that she was pregnant. "A baby," Isaiah had whispered when she told him, his hand splaying protectively over her still flat stomach. "We're having a baby. Are you happy?" She'd been nervous to tell him, uncertain how he'd react. "Happy? Willa, He'd pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "I'm everything. Thrilled, terrified, grateful. You're giving me a family. After years alone, after thinking I'd never have this, you're giving me everything I've ever wanted." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer. Willa bloomed with health, her body growing round with their child. Isaiah was endlessly attentive, building her a comfortable chair for the porch, making sure she never lifted anything heavy, rubbing her feet in the evenings when they ached. "You're going to spoil me," she protested. "That's the plan." He kissed her swollen belly gently. "Both of you." Their son was born in late December, during a gentle snowfall. The local midwife had come up a week earlier to stay with them, and she guided Willa through the labor with calm expertise. Isaiah held Willa's hand the entire time, murmuring encouragement, refusing to leave even when she gripped him hard enough to leave bruises. When the baby finally arrived, red-faced and squalling, Isaiah cried. He held his son with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face, and Willa fell in love with him all over again. "He's perfect," Isaiah whispered. "Willa, he's perfect." They named him Samuel, after Isaiah's father. Samuel Isaiah Bridger, born into love and safety, knowing nothing of the darkness his mother had escaped. He was a happy baby, quick to smile, and watching Isaiah with him made Willa's heart overflow. "You're such a good father," she said one evening, watching Isaiah rock Samuel to sleep, his massive hands gentle as they cradled the tiny body. "I had a good example, and I've got a good partner." Isaiah looked at her, his eyes soft. "Everything good in my life started the day you walked up this mountain, Willa. Everything. You saved me," she said quietly. "No, you saved yourself. I just gave you a safe place to land." He settled Samuel in his cradle, then joined Willa by the fire. "You did all the hard work surviving, healing, building yourself back up. I'm just lucky I got to be part of it." "We're both lucky," Willa said, leaning into his solid warmth. "We found each other when we both needed it most." The years that followed were full and rich. Samuel grew into a bright, energetic boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's dark hair. He was followed by a daughter 2 years later, Rose, named for Willa's mother. Then another son, Michael, and finally another daughter, Clara. The cabin expanded with their family, Isaiah building additional rooms, making space for their growing brood. The homestead thrived under their combined efforts, becoming one of the most productive in the region. Willa's garden was legendary, and Isaiah's craftsmanship was sought after by people from Gold Hill and beyond. They made trips to town regularly now, no longer hiding. Willa had friends, other mothers who gathered to share recipes and child-rearing advice. Isaiah had respect, known as a fair dealer and a man of his word. They built a life that was normal and good, marked not by what they'd escaped, but by what they'd created together. On their 10th anniversary, they stood on the porch watching their children play in the yard. Samuel, now 9, was teaching his younger siblings to skip stones in the creek. Rose was 7, determined and fierce. Michael was 5, gentle and thoughtful. Clara was 3, already showing signs of the strong will she'd inherited from both parents. "Do you ever think about Wyoming?" Isaiah asked, his arm around Willa's waist. "Sometimes. but not with pain anymore. Just as something that happened that led me here. She turned to look at him, this man who'd given her everything. You asked me once what Charles did to deserve having his house burned down. I never really answered. You don't have to. I want to. He took my voice, my freedom, my sense of self. He made me small and scared and silent. He tried to break me completely. Willa's voice was steady, strong. But he failed. I survived him. I found you. I built this life. And every day I wake up happy and loved and free is proof that he didn't win. That I did. Isaiah pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her hair. I'm so proud of you. Of everything you've overcome, everything you've built. We've built, she corrected. I couldn't have done any of this without you. You could have, but I'm grateful I got to be part of it. They stood together, watching their children, the sun setting over their mountain home. Smoke rose from the chimney. Dinner was ready inside, and love permeated every corner of their lives. This was what freedom looked like, Willa thought. Not just escape from danger, but the building of something beautiful in danger's place. Not just survival, but joy. I love you, she said. The words as easy now as breathing. I love you too, Isaiah replied, his voice full of the wonder he still felt, even after all these years. Forever, Willa. That's my promise. Forever, she echoed, and meant it with every fiber of her being. That night, after the children were asleep, they sat by the fire as they'd done countless times before. But tonight felt special somehow, weighted with significance. Isaiah pulled out a piece of paper, carefully folded, and handed it to Willa. What's this? The deed to this place. I'm putting your name on it, making you equal owner. Should have done it years ago, but I'm doing it now. His expression was serious. If anything ever happens to me, I want you to know this place is yours. That you'll always have a home, always be secure. Isaiah, nothing's going to happen to you. We can't know that. Life's uncertain. But this I can control. This place we built together, it's yours as much as mine. I want it legal and official. He took her hands. You never have to be at anyone's mercy again, Willa. Not even mine. You're independent, capable, and this is your home by right, not just by marriage. Tears filled her eyes. Even after all these years, he was still thinking of her dignity, her agency, her freedom. Thank you, she whispered. For this, for everything. Thank you for choosing me, for building this life with me, for giving me a family and a purpose and a reason to be grateful every single day. He kissed her hands gently. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Willa Bridger. Never doubt that. As winter settled in once more, the family prepared as they did every year, supplies laid in, animals secured, everyone safe and warm. But this winter was different, because for the first time, Willa felt no echo of fear. No shadow of the past intruded on her happiness. She was exactly where she belonged, with the people she loved, in the home they'd built together. Samuel was reading by the fire, sounding out words carefully. Rose was helping Clara with a puzzle, while Michael carved a piece of wood with a small knife Isaiah had made for him, copying his father's technique. Isaiah sat in his chair, working on a new project, a rocking horse for Clara's upcoming birthday. And Willa moved between them all, checking on each child, kissing heads, receiving and giving hugs freely. This was her life now. Not running, not hiding, not surviving. Living, fully, joyfully, completely living. Ma, tell us the story, Samuel called out, about how you and Pa met. The children loved this story, requested it often. Willa had edited it considerably for young ears. focusing on the romance and adventure rather than the darker elements. But the heart of it remained true, a woman in trouble, a mountain man who asked the right questions, and love that had bloomed in unexpected circumstances. Your father was the bravest, strongest, kindest man I'd ever met, Willa began, smiling at Isaiah across the room. He looked up from his work, his eyes warm. He saw me when I was lost, and he offered me a home. He asked questions no one else had thought to ask. He protected me when I needed it. But more importantly, he helped me become strong enough to protect myself. And then you fell in love? Rose asked, her voice dreamy. And then we fell in love, Willa confirmed. Not all at once, but slowly, day by day. We learned to trust each other, to work together, to build something worth having. And eventually, we built all of this our home, our family, our life. Best decision I ever made, Isaiah said, was asking your mother to stay. Best decision I ever made was saying yes, Willa replied. The children returned to their activities, content with the familiar story. But Isaiah kept looking at Willa, his expression full of the same love and wonder he'd shown that first night when he'd kissed her by the Christmas fire. 10 years, 4 children, countless challenges and triumphs, and still he looked at her like she was precious. She crossed the room and settled beside him, fitting into his side as naturally as breathing. His arm came around her automatically, pulling her close. Happy, he murmured. Beyond measure, she replied honestly. I never knew life could be this good. It's only going to get better. We've got years ahead of us, Willa. Decades, if we're lucky. Watching these kids grow up, maybe even having grandchildren someday. Building an even bigger, better life together. He kissed her temple. And every day of it, I'm going to love you more than the day before. That's my promise. I'll hold you to it, she said, smiling. Outside, snow fell softly over the mountain, blanketing their home in white. Inside, the fire burned warm, the children played happily, and 2 people who'd found each other in the darkest of circumstances basked in the light they'd created together. Willa thought about the girl she'd been terrified, broken, fleeing through the night with nothing but her determination and hope. If she could speak to that girl now, she'd tell her to keep going, to trust that the darkness wouldn't last forever, to believe that somewhere ahead, a mountain man with kind eyes and gentle hands would ask the question no one else had thought to ask. What did he do to deserve it? And in asking that question, he'd give her back herself. She'd tell that girl that healing was possible, that love was real, that freedom tasted like mountain air and looked like children laughing and felt like strong arms holding you safe. She'd tell her that the hard journey was worth it, that the peace and joy waiting at the end made every struggle meaningful. But most of all, she'd tell that frightened girl what she knew now with absolute certainty, that she was strong enough to survive, brave enough to heal, and worthy enough to be loved completely and without reservation, that the right person would see her value, would cherish her strength, would stand beside her through everything and never ask her to be less than she was. That was what Isaiah had given her, not rescue, but recognition. Not salvation, but partnership. Not just safety, but a life worth living. What are you thinking about? Isaiah asked, noticing her expression. How lucky I am, Willa said simply. How grateful. We're both lucky, he replied, holding her closer. We found each other when we needed it most, and we had the courage to hold on. Not everyone gets that chance. Then we'd better make the most of it. Every single day, Isaiah promised. Every single day for the rest of our lives. And they did. Through the years that followed, through the inevitable challenges and changes life brought, they held to that promise. They made the most of every day, built a legacy of love and strength, and taught their children by example what real partnership looked like. When Willa Bridger was an old woman, surrounded by children and grandchildren, someone asked her once what her secret was, how she'd built such a beautiful life from such terrible beginnings. She'd smiled, taken Isaiah's weathered hand in hers, and said simply, "I met a man who asked the right question, and when he offered me a chance, I was brave enough to take it." Isaiah had squeezed her hand, his eyes still blue and bright despite his years, and added, "She was always brave. I just gave her a place where that bravery could flourish." They'd looked at each other then, these two people who'd found love in the shadow of trauma, who'd built something beautiful from broken pieces, who'd proven that it was never too late to start over, never too late to heal, never too late to find happiness. And in their shared gaze was a lifetime of love, respect, partnership, and joy. The story of the woman who'd fled a burning house and the mountain man who'd asked what her husband had done to deserve it became legend in Gold Hill and the surrounding areas. Parents told it to their daughters as encouragement: you can survive, you can start over, you can find love after pain. Young men were told to be like Isaiah Bridger, strong but gentle, protective but respectful, offering safety without demanding submission. But for Willa and Isaiah themselves, it was never a story. It was simply their life, the life they'd chosen, the life they'd built, the life they'd fight to protect until their last breath. A life that proved, definitively and beautifully, that love could bloom even in the harshest circumstances, that healing was possible, and that sometimes asking the right question at the right moment could change everything. Their cabin still stood on that mountain long after they were gone, a testament to Isaiah's craftsmanship and their shared determination. Their descendants kept it maintained, turned it into a family gathering place where stories were told and love was celebrated. And always, when the snow fell soft and white over the Nevada mountains, when the fire crackled warm in the stone hearth, someone would tell the story of how it all began, with a woman fleeing darkness, a mountain man offering light, and a question that changed everything. What did he do to deserve it? In the end, Willa Bridger's answer was simple. Charles Ashford had done everything to deserve the destruction of his house and the loss of his wife. He'd earned it through cruelty, violence, and disrespect. And in losing her, he'd freed her to find something infinitely better. A love that honored her, a partner who valued her, a life that celebrated her strength rather than punishing it. And Isaiah Bridger's answer was equally simple. He'd asked the question, offered the help, and loved the woman because it was the right thing to do, because she deserved it, because her courage and strength in survival had earned her every happiness he could provide. Together, they'd built something that lasted not just a homestead or a family, but a legacy of love, respect, and partnership that echoed through generations. They'd proven that it was possible to heal from trauma, to love after pain, to build beauty from ashes. And every day of their long, happy life together was proof that sometimes the most important thing one person can do for another is simply ask the right question, offer genuine help, and love without reservation. Everything else, the healing, the growth, the joy, flows naturally from that foundation. That was the true story of Willa and Isaiah Bridger. Not a tale of rescue, but of recognition. Not a story of salvation, but of partnership. A love story that began with fire and fear and ended with peace and joy. and a family that carried their legacy forward with pride. And if you'd asked either of them, on any day of their 53 years of marriage, if they'd change anything about their journey, they'd have said no. Every struggle, every challenge, every moment of fear had been worth it to arrive at the life they'd built together. Every tear shed had watered the seeds of something beautiful. Every moment of courage had paved the way to lasting happiness. They'd found each other in the wilderness, two wounded souls seeking peace. And together, they'd built a home, a family, a life that proved love was stronger than fear, hope more powerful than despair, and that asking one simple question, what did he do to deserve it, could change the course of two lives forever. That was their story. That was their legacy. And long after they were gone, it continued to inspire, to give hope, to remind people that it was never too late to start over, never too late to heal, and never too late to find the love you deserved. Willa Bridger died at the age of 87, surrounded by her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, with Isaiah holding her hand as he'd done for more than half a century. Her last words were, "I'm not afraid. I've never been afraid, not since the day I met you." Isaiah followed her 6 months later, his heart simply giving out one peaceful morning. They said he'd died of a broken heart, unable to live without the woman who'd been his everything. But those who knew them best said he'd died of a full heart, one so filled with love and gratitude and joy that it simply couldn't contain any more. They were buried together on the mountain they'd loved, under the pine trees where they'd built their life, and on their shared headstone, their children carved a simple inscription, Isaiah and Willa Bridger. He asked the right question. She gave the brave answer. Together, they built a love that lasted. And it did last in the stories told, in the family that carried on their values, in the cabin that still stood strong, and in the hearts of everyone who knew that real love wasn't about perfection or ease, but about two people choosing each other every day, building something beautiful from whatever circumstances brought them together. That was the legacy of the woman who'd fled a burning house, and the mountain man who'd asked what her husband had done to deserve it. Not a story of victims and heroes, but of two equals finding each other and building something worth having. A love story for the ages, born in the Wild West, lasting forever.